In this activity, you're going to see some properties of acids and bases. Acids and bases are all around us, from the things we eat and drink to the soap we wash with. While many substances are acids or bases, some are neutral. We can classify acids and bases by their different properties. In this activity, first you will discover the properties of acids and bases and neutral substances by testing an example of each. Then you'll use this information to classify some substances as acidic, basic, or neutral. This table is currently empty. As you conduct your test, you'll be filled with the properties you discover for each group of substances. You have a copy of this table on your handout, so you can complete as we work through it. The three substances on the shelf are an example of an acid, a neutral substance, and a base. Hydrochloric acid, water, and lime water, which is a solution of calcium hydroxide in water. Use each test on the bench to find the properties of each of these substances. So first we're going to use blue litmus paper and hydrochloric acid. We dip it in and we see that it turns blue litmus paper red. I'm going to save that to our table. You should write that on your table. Next, we're going to test red litmus paper. The red litmus paper stays red. You should fill that in on your table. Next, we're going to test phenolphthalein. Phenolphthalein is a solution which is an acid-base indicator. It can change color. In this instance, we put it in hydrochloric acid. It stayed colorless. And finally, we're going to test with metals. And we can see the bubbles releasing. Those are hydrogen bubbles. All right, so next we're going to move on to water, which is a neutral substance. We're going to test it with litmus paper, and we see that it stays blue. Then we'll test with red. We see that it stays red. Then we'll try phenolphthalein. We see that it remains colorless. Then we'll test with metals. And we see nothing happen. All right, and finally we're going to do our base, which is lime water, which is just calcium hydroxide in water. Test with litmus paper. We see the blue litmus stays blue. Next, we'll test with red litmus paper. We see the red litmus paper turns blue. Then phenolphthalein. We see that it turns pink. And then we'll test our metals. We see no change. All right, so now we've tested all three types of substances. The properties of acids, neutral substances, and bases have been added to the table. You want to make sure you have written these down on your table in your lab handout. Now there are 6 substances for you to test. You're going to find out if they are acids, bases, or neutral substances. So we'll start with the baking soda. We'll test it with blue litmus paper. We see that it stays blue. We can add that to our findings table. Next, we'll go to red litmus paper. We see that it turns blue. Next, we'll go to phenolphthalein. We see that it turns pink. And then finally, we'll test with metal. And we see no change. So now we have to classify this substance as an acid, neutral, or base. Since it compares with the base results, we'll call it a base. And we are correct. Move to the next substance. Sugar. We'll start with blue litmus paper. We see it stayed blue. We go to red. We see that it stays red. And then phenolphthalein. It remained colorless. And then finally the metal. We see no change. Since the litmus papers both stayed their color, the phenolphthalein did not change, and there was no reaction with the metal that compares with the neutral substance. So sugar is neutral. And then we go to the next. Try ammonia. Blue litmus paper first. We see it stays blue. And then we go to red. It turned blue. And then phenolphthalein. We see it turns pink. And then we go to our metal. There was no change. So then we classify this, since it turned red litmus paper blue and phenolphthalein pink, makes it base. Then we go to the next. Lemon juice. Do litmus paper first. Turn blue litmus red. And we go to the red litmus paper. Stayed red. And phenolphthalein. And stays pink. Stays colorless. And then the metals. We see the hydrogen gas be released. So we compare this to our table. We see that the red litmus is red, turned blue, red, and metal had a reaction, so that makes it an acid. And move to the next substance. Hand soap. Blue litmus paper first. Stays blue. Move to the red litmus paper. It stayed red. Move to the phenolphthalein. It stayed colorless. I'll test it with the metal. And we see no change. Since everything stayed their color and there was no change with the metal, we saw nothing happen. Makes it neutral. All right, and now our final substance, vinegar. Blue litmus paper first. It turns red. The red litmus paper stays red. Phenolphthalein remains colorless. And then the metal produces hydrogen gas. We look at our traits here. We find that it matches up with an acid. We were are correct. All right, so now we have finished this activity and these experiments. We discovered that acids turn litmus paper red while phenolphthalein remains colorless, and acids can also react with metals like zinc. Neutral substances show neither acidic nor basic properties. These substances do not change the color of indicators, and they do not react with metals like zinc. Bases turn litmus blue and phenolphthalein pink, but most don't react with metals like zinc.